So welcome everybody to this CAFS webinar, Calculating Your Personal Carbon Footprint. So just to set the context before we go into the detail, this is about our new carbon footprint calculators, and we have one for residents for personal use and one for businesses, and we're talking about the personal one today. They've been developed for us by Footprint Ltd, and it's based on their existing model that they've had around for about 12 years, but they've refined it for us and tailored it for our purposes. And all of this has been funded by South Lakeland District Council, and although they are funding my work and promotion in South Lakeland, it's free to use to anybody in Cumbria and Lancashire. Okay, I'm going to move on to some introductions now. I'm Molly Hogg from CAFS, and I am joined by Chris Hodgson from Action for Future. Chris has been working very closely with me, and other members of AFAF have been working on the development of the carbon calculator, and it's one of the tools that's going to be used in the Ambleside to Zero project. We're also joined by Ro Baker from CAFS, who's going to be working with other communities on the carbon calculator, and she'll be talking a bit later as well. So on to the agenda. I'm just going to start off with a brief recap or explanation of what a carbon footprint is, because I'm sure we all know the terms, but not everybody might be exactly clear on what we mean by that. Then I'm going to hand over to Chris, and he's going to talk about the benefits of calculating the carbon footprint of your lifestyle. It's then back to me, and I'm going to do a walkthrough of the calculator itself, telling you how to sign up and create an account, and then actually enter all of your data. I'm then handed over to Ro, and she's going to be talking about how you can engage with other people in your community and help to encourage and support them to use the calculator. And then it's going to finish off with me just explaining some extra support we have at CAFS to actually do something about it, because that's the main point really. It's all well and good understanding your footprint, but you really need to take action as a result. We'll then have a quick poll and then some Q&A at the end. Okay, so what is a carbon footprint? So carbon is shorthand for carbon dioxide, and that's used because CO2 is the most prevalent of the greenhouse gases. And the term footprint refers to the amount of carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases that are emitted from any activity. What it's measured in is kilograms or tons of CO2e, and the E means equivalent, so that's referring to the fact it's not just carbon dioxide, there's other gases as well. So you can measure the carbon footprint of absolutely anything you want to, and you can be as detailed as you want. It's totally up to you. So for example, you could measure the carbon footprint of a bowl of chips, or a flight, or a holiday. So just looking at each of these are some of the things that you might include in the footprint measurement if you wanted to go into detail. So for the chips, you'd have to think about the energy that was required and all of the agricultural process involved in growing the potatoes in the first place, and the emissions from the packaging, the transporting, selling the chips from the shops and all the emissions from the shops, and then cooking the chips in your home and the energy that took. For a flight, you could just limit it to looking at the amount of fuel that you use and the emissions from the plane, or you could also think about all of the energy and the emissions associated with making that plane itself. And then you might also go even further and think about all of the things that were consumed inside that plane during that flight, so all of the in-flight food, for example. Your holiday would then encompass both of those previous things and all of that detail within those individual items, so the flight and any food that you ate either on the flight or on your holiday. But then you'd also take into account all of the energy used in your hotel and all the emissions from the various activities that you undertook while on holiday. So as you can see, you can measure anything and you can go into as much detail as you want. So for us, and for our particular calculator, the way it's set up is that it looks at a year in your life, in your household, and it looks at the energy that you directly use to heat and light your building and all the appliances that you use in your building. It includes the energy from your travel, so the fuel you use in your vehicles or any public transport, and then it also goes into the emissions from the water that you use and the waste that you generate. And then finally, it looks at all of the things that you consume within your household, all of the goods and all of the services that you buy. It's not absolutely fully comprehensive, but it's a fairly good list that we think is quite a good balance between being user-friendly and doable, and also giving you a fairly robust calculation. Okay, that's it from me for now. I'm going to hand over to Chris.
Thanks, Molly. Just by little way of an introduction to myself. So I'm a resident in Ambleside. I'm part of the community group Ambleside Action for a Future. So we've got various subgroups that are looking at, for instance, developing a renewable energy project in Ambleside, or we have a growing group, for instance, as well. But my involvement specifically on this group is that I've helped develop the carbon calculator. In all honesty, ours is a little bit more complicated than most of yours will be, because we also run a bed and breakfast. So we've had to go through 2 sets of calculations. We've had to do one for our business, because our home is our business, and then also one for our personal consumption as well. So if it's any consolation, you doing yours will be relatively simple to us doing ours. But one of the major benefits that we found when we went through the calculator is that it started us on our journey. I think we'd been a little bit unaware of what our carbon footprint was before. We couldn't quantify it. We knew that our lifestyle, we knew that our business obviously had some impact on the environment, but this gave us a definite measure. And it was quite surprising when we went through it, just to actually find out what contributed towards our footprint. And for us, certainly finding out the impact, for instance, of the energy that we use, or the food that we consume, and especially the food waste that we have in our business separately, was quite an education for us and quite revealing. And of course, once you know what's contributing towards your carbon footprint, you can do something about it, and you can decide what actions that you might want to take. And I think the other massive benefit was that it gave us a quantifiable figure for us to measure progress with. So we did our calculations for the 12 months up until the start of COVID, because we almost thought that since the start of COVID, our lifestyle hadn't quite been the same as it was before. So we decided to take our energy consumption, our water consumption for the year before, and actually put those figures in place. And Molly will show you how to do that when we run through the calculator. But it gives us one really simple measurement now, one simple figure that we can gauge our progress with. And you can really easily see on the calculator the changes that you make, how they might benefit your carbon footprint going forward. And that's one of the things that we quite liked about it. I think we all know that the UK have got a net zero target of 20,050. And in Cumbria, we've set a target of 20,037. We've got one step further in Ambleside, and we've set 2030 as a really ambitious target. But it's quite nice to feel as if we're contributing towards that bigger goal of reducing our net carbon targets by 20,050 for the country. I think we're aware that there are some limitations. So when we looked at food sourcing, for instance, in buying things local, that doesn't really impact the calculations on the carbon footprint, even though we know it's a massive benefit in terms of our habits and our lifestyle. And I think that's just to be realistic. We can't cover everything in a carbon calculator tool. We can cover the vast majority of things, but it would have to get far too detailed and complicated to cover every single aspect of it. I think it'll become clearer over the next 20-25 minutes what we can measure. And then if you've got any questions on things that we don't currently measure, we'll try and pick those up in the question and answer as well. So I think I'll pass across to you, Molly, and you can start the walkthrough. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again, but this time to our website. 2 seconds, because I'm not on the website. Let's try again. Is that our website coming up there, Chris and Ro? Thank you, wonderful. We've put in the chat the link to the carbon footprint page, but I'll show you how to get there now. Ro kindly pasted it in the chat, and I failed to notice you'd already done it. So you've got 2 links in there, one from Ro and one from me. Okay, so this is where you need to start to find it. So you need to go to the CAFS homepage, which is cafs.org.uk. And then if you scroll down on that homepage, so I'm just going to get rid of that. Scroll down on the home page to popular services. You can see it in the middle here, carbon footprint calculators. So click on that link and it will take you to this new carbon calculator page. So this first page is the background and the context and some of the things that Chris and I have explained already today. And there's some videos there that really recap on that. So if you get down to the bottom, there's click on next, and that leads you to the calculators. Here's a little bit of context about carbon offsetting that you can read at your leisure, and I'll mention that again when we go through the calculator. So this is the step-by-step guide for using the calculators themselves. And again, if you scroll down to the bottom, this is where you click on the links to either the household calculator or the business calculator. We noticed that the way the calculator was set up originally by Carbon Footprint Limited, it's not ideal for a mobile device. It works slightly better if you click on this link rather than the first one, but you might have to scroll across a little bit to see all of it on a mobile. Just one thing to point out here as well, this video at the top talks about the things that you'll need to collect before you start calculating. I won't go through that today because it'll be obvious as I go through the calculator, but it's worthwhile doing that data gathering before you start inputting, and if you can, either on a piece of paper or on a spreadsheet, get it all in one place, and then it'll make the actual data entry a lot quicker for you. It's also a good idea to keep that if you can, if you want to come back and revisit it at another point. So first of all, what you need to do is create an account. So I'm going to click on this link and show you what you need to do. So first of all, you need to put in your email address. And I'm going to pick on Ro this time, so I picked on Chris last time, and I'm going to be ro@bmail.com. And then you click create account, and you have to put in your full name. And then there's just two simple questions. One's asking how committed are you to a low carbon or green lifestyle, and I know that Ro is very committed. And then your home postcode, which I don't actually know for Ro. But the reason we ask for this is really so that we at CAFS can get a feel for how much reach we've achieved with the calculator, what areas, what communities, and whether we're just reaching people that are already committed or whether we're starting to kind of influence people that haven't really started thinking about it yet. So if I clicked create an account, that would then send me an automatic email with my login details. But I'm not going to do that now because I've already got an account. So I'm going to cancel that, and I'm going to sign in as myself. Okay, so this is the calculator itself. I will zoom in slightly to make that a little bit bigger for you. Hope that's okay. Okay, so at the top here, you've got various options to change your details if you wanted to, including changing your password or deleting your account if you didn't want it anymore. You'll notice that you can switch to the business calculator. So that's the switch here. It looks almost identical from the first glance. If you hadn't originally signed up for the business calculator, by pressing switch, you would just be asked for a little bit of business information before you can start using it. But if you both want to do it for your business and your own household, then you can do that through the same account. I'm going to go back to the residential calculator here. Now this is the menu for selecting which year you want to calculate for. So it's set up from 2020 down to 2024. But if you chose for 2020 to put in 2019 data, that's totally up to you. If that works better for you as a more realistic not benchmark, a baseline, then do that if you want. The reason there's 5 years is because we've got a 5-year license to use it. We may well extend it in the future if it seems like it's a useful thing to do. We've also got an experimental tab at the bottom, or experimental option at the bottom. And this is really so that if you wanted to see, okay, if rather than taking 2 flights a year, I just holiday in the UK, what's the impact of that on my carbon footprint? And you can do that without messing up the actual data that you've already submitted. Okay, so onto the data entry itself, starting on the welcome page. What this asks for is how many people there are in your household. Now, this is really important because it works it out for your entire household. And then at the end, when we see the results, it divides it by the number of people in your household. So you need to bear that in mind when you're entering each of these things, that you need to think about everybody. So it's easy when it's like energy usage, but when it comes to perhaps how much money you spend on clothes, you'll need to think about everybody that you live with and not just yourself. So for me, it's 4.
Molly, could we just do one more click of your Zoom if possible?
I can.
There we go. Beautiful.
Is that better? Okay. I can zoom down a little bit now as well. I'll scroll down a little bit. Okay, so next tab is house, and this is all about your household energy. So you can input your electricity, natural gas, or if you're on oil, coal, other forms of gas, or wood pellets, you can enter whichever fuel you use to power your home. My data is already entered there for my approximate usage. This factor here represents the carbon intensity of the grid at the moment. So if you get your electricity from the grid, regardless of what tariff you're on, even if you're on a 100% renewable tariff, leave that as it is, because what that does is actually takes into account all of the renewables that are currently feeding into the grid. So it's still worthwhile switching and having a renewable energy tariff, because that actually means that further investment that you're spending on your electricity is going into more renewables. But unfortunately, at the moment, the grid still isn't fully green. The only difference would be if you had a private electricity supply that was perhaps connected to a community wind farm or something like that, and you knew for sure that 100% of your electricity was renewable. Gas, you can enter in various different units depending on where you're on, in what units it's measured according to your meter. So you should get all this information, I should have said earlier, from your energy bills. So either if you get paper bills or log on to your energy accounts to get the total annual figure that you've consumed. Oil could be in litres, coal in tonnes or in different size bags. Wood pellets here, I've got half a tonne of wood pellets because I've got a wood burner. So what you do at the end is you then click calculate and save, and actually mine's already done it. I haven't removed these already. You can see that each of my entries comes up at the bottom, they're listed at the bottom. If I make a mistake, if I've got it wrong, I could just click remove and it disappears. And if I wanted it back, and because it's still in there at the top, if I calculate and save again, and you can see it appears again on the list. So as you've saved that, if you move off this page, it's already saved onto the server, into your account, and you won't lose it. Okay, moving on to transport now. There's 5 different tabs covering the different forms of transport. The first one is flights. So you can enter up to 3 flight itineraries, but you can have multiple trips for the same itinerary. So if you went to, say, from Manchester to Paris 3 times in a year, or sorry, if you went 10 times a year from Manchester to Paris, you could put in 10 trips, and that would just be classed as one itinerary. So for this one, you need just to put in your airport from and to. So let's take that example, Manchester and to Paris. If you went via somebody else, you could put that in here, and you can select the class you flew, and then, as I said, the number of trips, and then calculate and save. And you can see that, sorry, I haven't removed my previous entries. That appears at the bottom here. If I was to, that's if I travelled on my own. If all of my family went with me, I'd need to account for everybody that travelled. So if it's all 4 of us, I would put in 4 there, making sure it's a return trip as well, calculate and save. And you can see, oh, it didn't actually do it. Okay, it's not cooperating. Normally, that would then do a larger amount for 4 trips or 4 people travelling on that itinerary. Okay, the next one is car travel. So you can enter, I'm going to remove this before I start. You can enter up to 2 cars. What you do is enter, in this case, your mileage. So imagine I travelled, say, 10,000 miles in my car. You can do it in kilometres if you prefer. You then select your car. Now the EU car database is the default, so just leave that as it is. And then it starts by, you find your car, first of all, by looking for the year. So I'm just going to pick a random one, 2011, and then it asks for the manufacturer. So let's go Lamborghini, I've just noticed that one. Select a model, I have no idea what these are. I'm going to have one of those and a coupe. It sounds very flash. And look at the inefficiency of that, grams per kilometre. calculate and save, and that's cost me 10 metric tons of CO2 from my Lamborghini. Now, a car is slightly different from other forms of transport in terms of the people with you. If that Lamborghini was full of my family, it would still be the same amount of miles and the same amount of carbon, because it's not adding any extra by having extra people in it. I suppose you could argue it's slightly more fuel intensive because it's heavier, but in terms of this, you just count for the miles rather than the people. Motorbike, you can enter up to 2. Again, you put in the number of miles, say 1,000, and again, you can see I've already put this in here. And then it's quite simple, it's just small, medium or large motorbike for this one. Other fuel is, for example, if you had maybe a boat for leisure purposes or a petrol lawnmower. So you can just enter in litres or in different units there, the amount of fuel that you have used. And again, that's for the full year. And then you'd click calculate and save, and it would appear at the bottom. Finally, we look at bus and rail. And this is all in miles or kilometres. So think about whether it's make sure you account for your return trip if you went there and back on the same transport. And this is probably something that you might want to think about separately before you start adding it in, because you'll probably take a number of different trips across the year and a number of different forms of transport. This one, we go back to the original methodology, and you have to account for everybody that travelled with you. And you can put in different forms of transport. Say I travelled 500 miles on a coach, calculate and save, and that will add an extra line. So you can just keep adding extra lines for different journeys that you've taken. Okay, moving on from waste now, from travel now, we'll have a look at waste. First of all, what you need to do is choose the waste type. Sorry, again, I'm going to remove what I've already done. Apologies, I should have done this before I started. So let's choose mixed recycling. You've got garden waste, general waste, or mixed recycling. Now you have to select your receptacle that it's collected in. We've only got one option here, which is a 55-litre box. So I'm going to come on to that in a second. And then you choose the disposal method. Should actually say collection frequency, but that's a little bit of an oversight in the calculator. So I'm going to say it's collected fortnightly, and then the fill level. So whether it's usually 100% full, 75, 50 or 25%. So I'm going to say it's 100% full, and then calculate and save. Now, there's variations on the waste collections across Cumbria depending on what council collects it for you. And you might find that you might have one box and 2 bags for different waste streams, for example. So if you wanted to also put in a bag that was smaller, let's go again, mixed recycling. You don't actually have an option for a different size receptacle, but what you would do in that case, you just have to make your own adjustments. So maybe it's half the size of your box, so put 50% full, and that will give a good enough approximation of the waste from that particular bag. And we can do the same for different waste types by selecting whichever one here. Water is much simpler. You just put in the amount of water that you have used during the year. You might be metered, in which case you would have an accurate figure. Some people aren't, I'm not. And if that's the case, you can use the typical consumption, UK consumption per person per day of 140 litres. So you can work out whether you think you're a low water user or a high water user and work it out on that basis. Right, the last tab here is, last data entry tab is goods and services. So this is all of the stuff, all the things you buy, all of the services you buy. Now this is to be entered in monetary terms, so how much money you've spent on these things. You can see down here the range of different things you can account for, from food down to insurance, because they all have a carbon impact. And you can choose whether you want to input per year, per month or per week. So I'll put in my food bill there, and it makes sense for me to do it on a weekly basis because I know roughly how much I spend on food per week. And as before, calculate and save, and it appears at the bottom here. Okay, now the exciting bit, move on to results page, and you get this lovely pie chart that shows you how the different aspects of your life contribute to your carbon footprint. And you can see here this massive blue, which is my Lamborghini. So I would know instantly to go and get a different car instead, perhaps an electric car. In fact, that's something I failed to mention. If you have an electric car, you wouldn't account for it in the car section. You would account for it in terms of the electricity you use to fuel it. And you would do that in the home section. So I'll just quickly go back to there. So to your house and your electricity. Now, if you have a charge point at home, that will automatically be incorporated within your electricity bill. But if you charged at a public charge point or somewhere else, you'd probably just have to find out from your whatever account you used how much electricity you used for your car. Okay, so that's the overall picture, and then you get the individual amounts listed below, and it tells you your total carbon footprint of your household. If you scroll further down to where the feet are, it tells you underneath that equates to 4.2 tonnes per person per year. Now you'll see there that my footprint compared to the UK average is smaller. Now that will be because I haven't filled it all in. It also talks about the average footprint for people in the UK being 6.5 metric tonnes. Now, other figures and figures we've got on our website are that it's 13 tonnes per person in the UK. And again, it comes back to what I said at the beginning. It totally depends on what you include within that. And that bigger figure of 13 tonnes will include all sorts of things like your own share of emissions from public infrastructure, like the building roads, that kind of thing, which isn't accounted for here. So that's just in case you're wondering why that's so much lower. Just finishing off now with other things you can do on this results page. You can download a report, and all that really is just a PDF of your results. And then you can click here, view guide, and this is a link back to the CAF's website and all of the carbon reduction advice we've got in our sustainable living guide. Finally, what you can do if you want to is you can offset that footprint. Now, this is a link directly to Carbon Footprint Ltd, our developer. It's to their offsetting programme. CAF's policy on offsetting, very similar to Amplified Action for Future, is that it should be carbon reduction is the absolute priority. But CAF's recognises that there is a role for offsetting. If you're doing everything you can to reduce and you want to offset that which you absolutely can't reduce at the moment, then yes, that is part of the overall package for tackling climate change. What I would advise you to do though is to check whichever program you want to choose, whether it's this one or whether it's another one. Just check for yourself what standard of offsets are being offered, whether it's verified, what projects it's invested to, and there are some that are local. I think that the Cumbria Wildlife Trust have an offsetting programme that you might want to check out for doing something local. I think this one allows you to offset in local forests if you wanted to, but you have to double check that for yourself and see what you think of that. I think that is it, unless there's anything Chris wants to point out that I might have missed.
Not specifically. There's a few bits in the questions and answers, Molly, but I suggest that we'll pick those up at the end when we rattle through them. Okay, lovely. Right, I'm going to stop sharing this and I'm going to hand over to Ro. Has that moved back to the slides?
Yes, it's gone back to support to use the calculator.
Yep.
There we go. That's great.
Is this your one, Ro? Yeah.
Yeah, it is. So this was just a few thoughts about if you felt that you'd like to engage with the wider community, because I know that some of you here will be thinking this would be a great thing to get community groups involved with. So my thoughts were that nobody knows your community like you do, and general local knowledge is key here, because what you want to do is to reach people through methods that work within your community, and each community is very, very different in how they approach things. While we're in lockdown, you could start looking at social media groups. I know that there's lots of really good neighbourhood groups and recycling forums sprung up everywhere during lockdown, and that might be a way to engage with people. And you could think about sharing the link to the carbon footprinting toolkit on there. You could think about joining with others to do it online. That would be quite a fun thing to do, and compare your results. As we come out of lockdown, it might be something that you'd like to engage with your local school in and get some school kids to take part, use it as part of their curriculum. And just thinking about the ways in which you communicate with people about it. Some people aren't going to be driven by ideas around climate change or even carbon. And this may seem really counterintuitive, but actually what you want to get at the end of this is actions, whether it's actions for yourself or whether it's actions within your community. So I think the thing to think about is the drivers in your community. For many, it will be about saving money on their utility bills and maybe switching their utilities providers to 100% renewable. And maybe you can start looking at networking with small groups of people that can help each other do that. The driver may be things around supporting local shops or buying local products, developing local food supplies. They may be around retrofitting homes or making homes more comfortable and a better place for children to learn in. And it may be around being able to collectively purchase renewable energy, or it might simply be around your health and well-being. So thinking about calculating the carbon it takes to drive your car or take aeroplanes, maybe thinking around, well, actually, if we all walked a little bit more, or if we all cycled more, then we'd not only be fitter, but we'd also be reducing carbon. There's loads of really fantastic information on the CAPS website on the link around sustainable living guides that Molly's already mentioned. Just stacks of information all laid out really well with different headings like local food, like energy, like home retrofit, lots of stuff there to have a look at. And if you're really interested in energy questions around your own home or domestic properties, we've got a home energy question time event coming up on the 24th of March that I think would be really great. And that's on the events page on the CAPS website. And I think that's it, Molly.
Thank you, Ro. I've just pasted in the chat the link to that event that Ro just mentioned, and to our Call to Cozy service. It's also on the CAPS website that I will come on to now. So Rose mentioned some of these things already, but as well as the home energy event from April, we're going to be setting up a series of carbon reduction sort of advice sessions, small groups of people that you can book onto a session with probably Ro and myself and some others from AFAF and other community groups, to really talk about any plans you have for reducing the carbon footprint of your lifestyle, any questions that you might have. It's just really a support session to try and help you kind of get further on with your plans for reducing your carbon footprint. We might, if we're lucky, be able to organise some in-person drop-in sessions in Ambleside. And as I mentioned before, if you want specific help to reduce your home energy, then the CAPS Energy Services team are there to help you. So either look on our website on the link in the chat, or you can phone them on this number here. Right, okay, time for the fun bit, which is the poll. I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to launch my poll. I think there's 4 questions, and if you just click on an answer, and then I'll share the results at the end. Starting to come in now. Okay, 25 out of 39 voted, going up. All right, let's do a 30 seconds. Okay, 6 more people to vote. Last chance. Okay, I'm going to close the poll now and let's see the results. So can you see that now? Hopefully you can. Okay, so how likely are you to measure your personal carbon footprint? The majority of you are very likely. That's great. Really pleased to hear that. And if anybody doesn't think they will, any reasons why? A few, I don't think it's useful, I don't have time. That's fair enough. It is a little bit time consuming. So you need to think it's worthwhile if you want to do it. And how likely are you to take advantage of our online advice sessions? Most of you quite likely. That's great. We're publishing more information about it on our website and in other kind of social media in the coming months. So that'll help you decide whether or not you think it will be useful for you. They're free, by the way. There's no charge to come along. And which topics would you be interested in? So the vast majority there on home energy efficiency. So if you're interested in that, as Ro and I've mentioned, loads of information already on the CAF's website, on the For Your homepage, and you can contact that team for a free advice call, a free quick advice call. If you want a long time speaking to them, there might be a charge. So yes, you can do that immediately, and then we'll see what we can do in those advice sessions with you. And also there's that event coming up on the 26th of March that you might want to book onto if you want to ask your questions about that. Okay, great. Thank you very much for doing that. That helps us. And then, oops, have I stopped sharing that? Okay, just before we get on to the Q&A, just one last slide, just for follow-up. If you do try and use a calculator and you've got any queries, if you get stuck with anything, then just email us at office@cafs.org.uk, and that'll get passed on to me and we can help you out with that. And also just a couple more links for the chat. These are the last ones. If you can fill in our feedback form, that would be most appreciated. And also, really don't like to ask this at all, but we do have a donations option. We are a charity, and any further donations help us to just extend the work that we can do. Okay, that's it from me on the slide. So Chris is going to kick off reading out the questions. Between him and Ro, going to read them out, and between us, we'll answer them.
Thanks, Molly. Yeah, just picking up, Jack posted a question quite early on in the discussion. Really just going on the back of his parents' experience through World War II and rationing, and asking if we shared his view that all households should have a carbon budget, and was there any talk about such a budget being introduced. Certainly to my knowledge, there's not been any conversation about such a restriction or such a target or such a budget for individuals or households, Jack. And I think my personal view is that we're probably not at that point whereby we should limit households to specific budgets. I think we should be trying to educate people to change their lifestyle and make the right decisions for themselves. I suspect that if anything does get any restrictions brought in, and there's certainly nothing even on the horizon for that, it's likely to be flying and limiting flights, or whether it's for instance having a tax or a budget on your flight capability. But certainly there's nothing even on the horizon at the moment for that I'm aware of. So I'm not sure if Molly or Ro want to add anything to that question.
Not really, I'd agree with what you've said.
Yeah, I'd agree, Chris. At the moment, it's nothing that I've heard about from government at all.
I think we covered the second question about how battery electric vehicles were input in the cars period. I think we have, haven't we? Yeah.
I think we have. That was to put into the household electric section. A question from Richard: will there be an opportunity to include data on any export of solar energy to the grid if you've already got solar PV. This would in theory provide a carbon offset by providing renewable energy to your local network. I think many older solar PV installs are based on this premise, i.e. focus on export to gain the FITs, even if this is no longer available. Molly, how does that work in the...
So it's not accounted for individually. It's accounted for in the fact that your electricity from the grid will be much lower or even zero if you've got solar PV. So it's accounted for in that way because you're not taking energy out of the grid. And the energy that you export to the grid is factored into that. Do you remember at the beginning I mentioned that coefficient that is the energy, the carbon intensity of the grid. So if your solar PV wasn't there, that factor would be ever so slightly higher. So even though you can't individually single out what your your offsetting contribution is, it is taken into account in the grand scheme of things.
Thanks, Molly. I'm just going to pick up a question from Sue and Tony about how big is a blue general waste bag. It might vary with your local area, Sue and Tony, but if I go on Ambleside, because I just saw a question fly up as well about the blue boxes. So the blue boxes are 55 litres, and that's applying to Ambleside, which I'm assuming therefore implies to the SLDC region. Now, I have to put blue boxes and bags out as well. So my estimation on a bag is approximately 100 litres. If someone knows the exact answer to it, then please type it into the chat function and then we can have a proper interactive session. But if I say that a blue box is 55 litres and a blue bag is about 100, so you can kind of work it. If you fill a blue bag, that means you're filling the equivalent of 2 boxes. That might be as good a guide as any.
Is there any way to split out the electric vehicle carbon impact that can be quite significant compared to the house? So it would highlight the need to move to a green electricity tariff and or reduce mileage. Well, you could, it depends whether you're charging at home or not. If you're charging at home, it would just get added to your electricity bill, but I guess it would depend on whether or not you have an app linked to your charge point that tells you how much electricity has flowed through your charge point. I'm not quite sure. If you can separate the two out, then you could compare the amount you've used for your home as proportion as the amount you've used for your car. I'm not sure whether that answers your question properly. Is there any other thoughts, Chris, on that one?
No, I'm not sure I can throw any enlightenment on that one. If we want to come back to you separately on that one, Eugene, then we're more than happy to.
I haven't got anything to add to that, Molly. I did start to wonder about how do the automatic meters, smart meters in homes, do they offer any support when you're trying to fill in a carbon footprint?
They would in terms of telling you how much electricity you've used. I think that would just be a quicker way of finding it out rather than from your electricity account. Because what we're after here is a full year's amount. So the smart meters are really good at telling you day by day in kind of live readings, but what we're after is the full amount for the year.
Yeah, and they wouldn't split out things like electric vehicles. That isn't included on a smart meter. I don't have.
Not unless it was really, really smart. I don't think most of them do that.
Really smart. Okay. So Sheila's asking, can I check that you're using the CSE University and Exeter Impact Tool? Yes, we are, Sheila. We've been looking at this. I think you're referring to the parish carbon footprinting toolkit, and I think it's really great. We've been having a play around with it and inputting different parish to see what the outcome is, and also to compare against different parishes within Cumbria. So yes, a really, really useful tool that you can find on the, I'm assuming you can find it on the CSE website, and that's the Centre for Sustainable Energy. Anything to add on that, Molly?
I suppose just to say that it measures it in a different way. So that's looking at, that measures it for the whole town, for the whole parish, based on, I suppose, externally published data from a lot of things and kind of average benchmarks for things. So it takes kind of all of that whole town information and collates it all into one, whereas our tool is kind of from the bottom up, from an individual basis up. And we do have the option, because the data's safe, we do have the option of looking at all the people, say, from Ambleside who have used it and seeing what picture that gives for Ambleside. So we can compare the two, and kind of all of ours reflects actual uses, whereas some of the Exeter tool is based on averages. So the two kind of, it's a different methodology, but they are complementary.
Thanks, Molly. Just Mary's question about how many participated in the poll. I think, was it all but about 6 or 7 people that did?
Yeah,
that
33.
the poll? Yeah, 33 out of 39, Mary. Just picking up Tommy's question, a very specific question. Ignore if not appropriate. I'm sure it's very relevant, Tommy. Is an electric shower a lot better or lower emissions than a mixer shower using a combi boiler, and if using a renewable energy provider?
That'd be a question for our colleague Tina, who would know that answer. And I think Tina, the expert, she does actually have an electric shower herself. I don't know which is more efficient, but your combi one would be using gas, which isn't currently renewable. Whereas your electric one, if you're on a renewable energy tariff, would be using electricity from the grid, which is continuously decarbonising with all of the extra renewables that are going on it. So it may cost you more if it's less efficient, because it might be using more more electricity than the gas equivalent in terms of pounds, but from a carbon point of view, probably better, but I'm not an expert.
I think it's an interesting conversation, this one, about impact of reducing your carbon versus cost. In reality, quite a lot of the time that you reduce your carbon footprint, you do actually put some more pennies in your pocket, because generally things like you're actually saving energy per se. I think it is true that there are 2 or 3 bits that if you change your lifestyle, you might reduce your footprint, but it might cost a little bit more. So I think those are decisions that everyone's got to take for their own circumstances.
So another question here from Jack. Are backroom calculations for each category based on national per capita averages, like the renewables point via the grid? So, for example, if one household uses ethical environmental insurance, is that reflected?
Shall I answer that one? So the factors used, the carbon emission factors used in this calculator are updated annually, and they are government published, agreed, verified factors. I'm not entirely sure whether it covers every single aspect on that final goods and services list. So whether or not it includes insurance, I don't know. I'm not sure that it does. I'm not sure quite where that factor comes from. But what it will be an average. So it will be an average carbon intensity across all insurances. So unfortunately on ours, you don't have the option to choose an ethical finance option. It will just be an average option. What we did do, I forgot to show you actually, on the food, you can select your diet type from vegan all the way up to high meat. So that's the only one that you can select a variation on. So because that one's really significant. So if you were a vegan, you'd have a much lower carbon footprint than if you were a very high meat eater. But all the other ones, it is an average.
Thanks, Molly. And just, I knew we should have had Gillian on this panel. Gillian's actually gone and updated our information. Yes, individual carbon budgets have been looked at by some NGOs. So there you go. That answers the very first question that we had at the start of the list. Thanks for educating and informing us, Gillian. Anne-Marie's question, that's a great question. Landlords could have a huge impact if they would get on board. I think we're all absolutely on that now. In theory, some of the landlords might, or certainly like self-catering accommodation providers, might be picked up by the business sessions that we're having. So, but I think it's an absolutely fair point, is that. And does the vehicle use take account of manufacture and servicing of the vehicle? My understanding is yes, but I'll throw it back across to Molly for clarification on that one.
No, not in that tab, but it does on the final tab. If you bear with me, I will show you where it is, just to clarify that one. Okay, can you see that again?
Yeah.
Okay, so if we go on to, so it's not taken into account here, because that's purely to do with fuel efficiency, really, how much fuel is burned and emissions coming out the tailpipe. But if we go into goods and services here, you can select motor vehicles not including fuel costs. So if you buy a new car, you can put in your whatever it is, £10,000 for your new car, or £100,000 for my new Lamborghini, and that includes the emissions associated with the manufacturer. And I think in there as well, you put in your servicing costs and your MOT costs. I think there's not a separate home for that. So any other costs apart from fuel go into there. I'll just quickly show you this as well, that I failed to mention. That's the drop-down list for your dietary options there, which you can choose. Okay.
Just on that one, we did find that aspect of it quite useful, just to see the impact that changing your diet and the amount of meat that you consume has an impact on your carbon footprint. Play around with that and just see, just try changing the figures just to see what impact it might have for yourself or for your household.
Next up, we've got some useful information from Richard on if you have a BEV charge point at home, then this is usually associated with an app that'll indicate the amount of energy used to charge your car. So you can differentiate this from your household use. There is now the opportunity to buy EV chargers that allow you to divert excess solar PV to your EV. And he's given us the web link there. So thanks very much, Richard, for that useful information. That's good to know. Gillian's got really bad spelling, she says. Who else have we got? I think I've missed one there. I saw one from Joe, and I think that was around landlords again. Eugene asks, yes, one could also calculate a rough total figure for BEV consumption by looking at the annual mileage and estimating kilowatts per mile. I think, Richard, you'll have to decide whether you're a light or medium meat eater. I don't think anyone can do that for you. And yes, Joe. Sorry, Chris.
Sorry, yeah, can I just add on that, just for Richard's benefit, really? There's a degree of doing, as long as you're consistent in how you measure it for yourself, then you can pick up the changes over time. No one's going to test you on your answers. No one's going to look at your carbon footprint. It's for you, and it's for you as an individual, I think, to assess what you think is right for you. If you're eating meat every single day of the week, you might be a heavy meat eater. If you were having it 3, 4 or 5 times, you might class yourself as medium. You might class yourself as light once or twice a week. And I think it's how you change behavior that is maybe the important thing. So don't get too hung up about how you classify yourself. No one's going to test it or measure you on it. Just maybe look at how, if you change things, how they impact your footprint.
There is, that's right what Chris has said, there is a little bit of extra guidance. If you click on, I've just shown it up on the screen here, if you click on the info button next to each tab, so they're distinguishing, this is again from Carbon Footprint Limited, they're distinguishing medium meat eater, 50 to 100 grams of meat per day, low meat and less than 50 grams of meat per day. So again, it's just a guideline. As Chris said, don't get too worried about the
there's quite a lot of those bits. If you click on the info, they do bring up quite a lot of extra information for you, just to clarify.
Yeah, it's just another one on their fashion there. That's more of a statement.
That's great. Thank you both for clarifying that. That's great. Anne asks an interesting question. Do you advise doing the calculation every 3 months, every 3 months, say, as a way of providing an incentive to improve performance? I hadn't really thought about that. Molly, have you got any thoughts on that? Obviously it's across a year, but you could do it more regularly.
If you want to commit to that, great, could do so. All you'll have to do is every time the calculator asks you for your amount, it will have to be for 3 months rather than for a year. So it will just require you to put it in that way. But yeah, it's totally up to you if you want to do that and challenge yourself like that. Crack on, it's great.
Joe, sheltered accommodation, have we covered that one about landlords? So
I think, Joe, there is Sustainable Keswick starting to look and have been looking for such a long time about carbon and about reduction, about getting to zero carbon, and loads of sustainable ideas. And it's certainly a question that we could pass on to them to sort of follow up on, see if there's any way in which they as a group could have a look at that for you.
I think that's the end of the formal questions. I know there's been a fair bit of correspondence going through the chat box, including some links and some recommendations about books, which are all great reads as well. I'm interested that Jack only eats wild meat, so I don't know if you live off roadkill or what. Molly, is there anything else that you want to add on the back of the Q&A?
I don't think so. I was just checking in like you were just in the chat to see whether we'd missed any questions. There's one from Daniel. Is the footprint of internet use accounted for, not just the electricity used by the computer?
I think it does. If you click on the info button, I think it includes all the server networks in there as well.
Yep, so that's on. Let me just, I keep losing the button. Bear with me for 2 seconds. Oh, where's it gone? That one? No, that might not be that one. Anyway, on the info button next to, sorry, I've got far too many screens open. Next to telephone, mobile cell phone call costs, it's included in that. So it's all to do with all of your sort of your IT and data network, as it were, services that you can go into there.
Well, my last comment will be, remind me not to go running on the fells when Jack's out.
Yikes.
Okay, well, we're at 8 o'clock, everybody. Thank you so much for all of your comments and for coming along. I hope you've enjoyed it and found it useful. As we said, keep an eye on our website for events and further promotions, and we'll be doing a lot of work in Ambleside, and Ro will be doing a lot of work. Do you just want to mention the communities you're working with, Ro?
So I'm working with the communities in Alston Moor, Keswick via SUSKES, and I'm working with Holton with Orton in Lancashire. And we're looking at carbon footprinting, both for businesses and for residents, and we'll be trying to work out best ways of engaging with wider community, which I think is the real challenge, isn't it? That obviously everybody who's engaged tonight are fully engaged, and really interesting, fantastic questions from everybody. And it's how do we get this out to the wider community and get more people engaged and involved in taking action. I think that's the key thing, isn't it? Thanks ever so much.
Beyond Ro and myself, we're getting a new community network coordinator person in post, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. So again, they will be working with community groups in other places as well. We're not just prioritising certain places, we're hoping to reach everybody across the whole of Cumbria. So yeah, there'll be lots of ongoing work to help you to both use the calculator and to take action as well. On that note, I think we'll say goodbye and thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming.
Thanks.
Look after yourselves.
Thank you.